we're excited to be here to talk about this month's book, which is Brave Not Perfect: How Celebrating Imperfection Helps You Live Your Best, Most Joyful Life. This book is by Reshma Saujani, and she is actually the founder of Girls Who Code. So if you are interested in, coding and women in STEM, she has other great books too that are kind of similar to this book, but she also has a lot of works about STEM education too. So, and she's great on Twitter and Instagram. So definitely recommend checking that out. So Brave Not Perfect basically is a book about being brave, not perfect, right? So imagine if you lived without the fear of not being good enough, if you didn't care how your life looked on Instagram. And it's really kind of geared towards women, although I think that everyone could get some things out of this book for sure, about perfectionism, and particularly how our society views perfectionism. So we have some discussion questions, and of course these will be up with the video as well. But my first impressions of the book and my kind of feelings about it overall were that it really is eye-opening how many ways we're expected to be perfect, and how that doesn't do what you would think perfection does, which would be make us better. It actually limits us a lot. So Amy, what did you think of the book overall?
I agree. I think that a lot of it had truth in it, and especially like growing up in the South in rural areas, there's this systemic gender role that, and just the way girls treat each other in general. We're not pushing each other up, we're holding each other down. Just in this view of you've got to be the best mom, you've got to volunteer for being room mom of all of your kids, you've got to be the snack mom at the games and do the carpool and do all the things. So I think that the idea of being perfect is something that is ingrained in us at the very beginning. And there's not a lot of room for failure. And this book really opens your eyes to it's okay to fail. It's okay not to know or have all the answers. You should still try new things, no matter what people think about you. So I liked it. It for me, it was a little. It was kind of slow getting into, but then I got into it, and everything was like truth, truth, truth. So
Yeah. Well, I think too that she talks about the difference that we get as children. Like girls are encouraged to be perfect, whereas boys, are encouraged to be brave. And I think that that's really interesting, because I think that we can take this book and look at it and be like, oh, like that's really messed up for girls. But like, isn't that kind of messed up for boys too? Like when we assume that boys or men either can't do anything or incapable of doing things, like that's doing a disservice to men too. The patriarchy hurts everyone is the kind of thought. But I think that you could probably ask almost any woman if they've been encouraged to be perfect rather than brave, and they would absolutely say yes and give hundreds of examples. I wonder what men would say to that. When were you encouraged to be brave rather than show emotion, or rather than be perfect? Or, and I think that if we asked men that, there would be a lot of men who would say, like, I feel that too. So I think that, she brings up that bravery is a really great trait to have, but when we paint it as something that can only be done by men, we're doing a disservice to everyone, right?
absolutely, I totally agree. Like it was said, the gender roles, and that men can't be nurturing. And she goes into this part of the book about, well, if it's not going to be done perfect, I'm just going to do it myself. I think that it's like, I'll give you a perfect example is my daughter takes ballet, and I am the volunteer for putting her hair in a bun, and her hair has to be in a perfect bun for ballet class. And my husband just like, oh, well, you can do it better, so you just do it. So it's one of those things where if you don't try, you're never going to learn to do the perfect bun. And if it's not perfect, who cares? You know, it doesn't have to be perfect every single time. So,
Well, and she kind of brings up like, so this book is from, it's a couple of years old. So it's from 2019 is when the paperback came out. And so it's not, it's not, it didn't just come out, but it's also, she's talking about social media in here. And we've kind of talked about that in other book clubs about, we also get a lot of that perfectionism. We grow up with it. And now that we're adults, we see it too, right? We see perfectly plated meals or perfect beach vacations, or, we see these things and we're like, oh, well, I should be perfect too. And I think that that is really, that's something I think that is put on men, but is very much put on women throughout their lifetime. That idea of perfectionism and look at so and so, like they're perfect. um I have the same problem in my house. I do some things admittedly better, but it's like, well, it would be fine if somebody else did it. It would be okay. Yeah.
the world's not going to end if you put the dishes in the wrong spot in the dishwasher. You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
They're still going to get clean. So, yeah, I totally see that. And I wonder,
Yeah.
I wonder how men, feel about social media, and really I would love to see the data on it as far as how men treat social media versus we know how women treat social media. Um,
Mhm.
and if they are comparing themselves to others as much as women are, I would love to see some data on that because you know most of the men that I know don't really care about social media, don't really post hardly anything. They might have an account or they go through their wife's account. So I would love to see the data on that.
Yeah. Or, like my husband posts on social media for his business. And so no one would ever, like, he posts business stuff and, I mean, fun stuff too, like pictures of meat and, all kinds of things. But like, if he became like Instagram famous, he would be an entrepreneur. Whereas if I became Instagram famous, I would be an influencer. And so I think that the words we're using around social media are really powerful too. And, she talks in this book about a lot of things that not only cost us money. So, like, she talks about fatigue, right? But also these like multi-billion-dollar industries that cater to perfection. And how, like, getting out of that cycle, it's kind of like when you say, not to go on my socioeconomic rant here, but when you tell someone who can't afford rent to not drink Starbucks, like that's not the problem. Like a $5 Starbucks drink is not the problem. Like living wages and all those kind of things are the problem. When you tell somebody to do self-care or to take care of themselves, you're competing against like multi-billion-dollar industries that are designed to make us feel bad about ourselves and to make us feel like we're imperfect. And I fall victim to that too. Like I'm a perfectionist and, the type of person who thinks they have to be perfect. And I beat myself up for that a lot. But then I also think like, well, like, you know, we see that's what the media, that's what our lives, that's what our cultures teach us is that we have to be perfect moms and perfect wives and perfect adults and perfect whatever. That's a lot of pressure. And so it's hard for like an individual to come out from underneath that.
It is, but it is not impossible. You can unlearn
Right.
things. And In reading this book, I've come along. I've been on a long journey in my short lifetime, um, and I could totally see myself in this book when I was maybe 20 years ago, where I really cared what people thought about me, and I didn't do things and didn't try things because I was afraid of what others might think or how they might feel. I think maybe it's what happens when you're in your 40s that you just stop caring about all that stuff. I don't know if it's a midlife crisis or if it's just, I'm in my 40s. Why should I care anymore? Um, but I know that you can unlearn things, and especially when it comes to like failure. That part
Mhm.
of this book it really spoke to me about how giving those tiny opportunities to fail and often early and often is so important, especially for younger kids. I remember
Right.
in school school came pretty easily to me, or I really worked hard to get straight A's, so I didn't fail until I hit college, and then I failed all the time. So how I handled those situations, hindsight, not very well then, but now I seek out failure is really not really what I do, but I never say no to something new. I always like to try new
Right.
things and experience new things, even though I know I'm not going to be perfect at them on the first try or the second or the 50th.
Well, and I think that a lot of girls, I call it gifted, like former gifted kid syndrome. Like, I never failed at anything. I mean, never. Um, I mean, for a long time, like even through like college, school always came very easily to me. And anytime something didn't come easily in school, I just didn't do it. Um, the number of times I switched majors was astounding. I just didn't do it because I didn't know how to. And I think part of that is that we see other people's highlight reels. Like we don't see what's kind of like how the sausage gets made, right? Like we don't see people's failures. And I think as women, we're not allowed in some ways, like culturally, to talk about our failures,
I think we change that. I
right?
like team brave and like doing something brave, and especially holding other women up and
Hmm.
allowing being there for them. I think that's something that's becoming more of a habit these days, with all of the activism that is around, with the just all the different communities that we have in our lives. Um, I think it's getting noticed more and more. We have a woman vice president, so it's one of those things where I think things are changing, and I think it's going to continue just to change and keep getting better. So I challenge us to hold each other accountable for holding each other up and putting each other on a pedestal and celebrating those failures together.
Right. Well, and I think too that she talks about like one of the discussion questions was about the quest for perfectionism kind of goes along with a fear of speaking your mind and going after what you really want. And I know, Amy, you and I have talked about this before, but I've brought up like job ads, right? Like job postings. Like if I apply for a job, like I have to tick every single box and then some, right? And in general, like most men don't do that. There's actually been studies shown that show that women are less likely to apply for jobs they're actually qualified for, and men are more likely to apply for jobs that they're only partially or maybe not even at all qualified for. And so I think some of that goes back to failure, but I think also this idea of going after what you really want. Like when you fail at something you don't care that much about, it doesn't hurt as much. And so I think that that's kind of an interesting point she brings up, is like, how do we hold each other up? How do we encourage each other? Maybe not encourage each other to fail, but encourage each other to try new things and be brave. And, she talks about, I'm not this yet. Like, how do we add yet onto the ends of our own sentences and the sentences of others?
Absolutely. And she also mentions in the book how, when you're struggling with a decision, how to think of it as, what advice would you give to someone else who is in your position? And we give advice better than we take it from ourselves. So
Yeah.
that's one thing right there that we can change moving forward, is in those decision making moments, who is our person that we would go to for advice, and if they were in the same situation, what would we tell them? And I think the power of yet is so important. And I think really where I began to embrace failure and um, kind of lift myself up is when I started teaching math to kids who hated math. So that's a really eye-opening experience there, is when you're told you're not any good at math. And most girls are told, oh, boys are better.
Mhm.
And it's not true. Boys aren't better. They're just not afraid to fail. Um, that when you hear that over and over and over again, you begin to believe it. And having to lift these little people, these tiny humans up and tell them that they can be math people, they can be good at math. I kind of started telling myself, you know what, you can do these things too. You might not be good at it yet, but you can be yet. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that, even though this book is not for, it's not geared towards educators specifically. I mean, one of the things that is true in education is that most teachers of, particularly of like the humanities, and most lower school teachers are women, and most hard science teachers and administrators are men. And that's not because men are naturally better at those things. It's because, culturally, and men are encouraged to do those things when they're younger. But like, also this idea of bravery, I mean, that's like, you're modeling for those kids, like, what bravery looks like and what perfectionism looks like. I mean, that's why, like, of course, our whole mission is to, transform schools and to engage students and empower educators. But also, like, I have real problems with, placing every piece of who a child's identity is on their grades, right? Teaching to the whole child. Well, we can't do that until we allow ourselves to move past, like, we have to be perfect.
there was
Because,
one of
like, perfect is A's.
yeah. So one of the questions in the discussion question, I'm trying to find it right now. I can't remember which one it is. Um, oh, that how can educators embrace the idea of brave, not perfect? And what I wrote down was, change how success is measured in the classroom.
Mhm.
Just change it. Instead of it's the process that matters, not necessarily the product or the end
Right.
result. It's what you've learned, your reflection on it, and how you can improve that really, really counts. And that's something that I embraced in the math classroom. I graded math on rubrics, just changing the way I wanted these kids who had never felt successful in the math classroom to feel successful. I wanted them to have that success, and it also in turn, the kids who never failed, they failed sometimes at the way in which success was measured. So it provided an opportunity for them to learn and grow from failure as well. So I think as educators, we really need to change that dynamic in the classroom of what is success and how is it measured.
Yeah. Well, I think even if you're in a situation where you have much more stringent kind of rules about grades and what, curriculums, there's still 1,000 ways to show kids that they can succeed that everybody has the ability for success. You know, a lot of um, a lot of teachers right now are not taking off points for things being late, right? That's a good example. Um, my daughter's math class, they actually take their test and then they get to retake it as many times as they need to get a certain score, you know. And there are ways to go around those. So if you're watching this and you are in a school situation where you feel like you don't have control over the curriculum, like you don't, kind of like perfectionism, you don't have to have control over everything to make a difference. So,
So true. You can't be what you can't see is one of the quotes from the book that I really enjoyed.
mhm,
Mainly because, like, you're talking about being a model for the students and trying new things and failing. If and especially with social media now, in the time that we're in now, kids won't know how to act because they don't see the kindness. They see,
mhm,
if they're in a situation where they see the gender role difference and how boys are brave and girls have to be perfect all the time, they won't know any different. So I think we have an opportunity to allow kids especially to experience different things and encourage them to break those barriers down. And if a boy wants to have dolls, go for it. If a girl
yeah.
wants to, be a computer programmer, go for it. And I'm definitely encouraging that one. So
Well, I think that goes back too to some stuff that we've talked about before with like we're doing our students a disservice if we don't show them vulnerability. Like, of course, we probably don't want to like break down all the time. And like, I'm a crier. Like, I'm like an angry crier, a sad crier, a happy crier. Like, every emotion, I'm a crier. That said, you know, having our students see that we're people with emotions and opinions and feelings and vulnerabilities, you know, that's healthy. Like, and we've gotten into this place, I think, as a culture that like we don't ever want to show our real feelings, and we feel like that's wrong somehow. And like teachers are expected to do far too much, but are also expected to be like kind of emotionless automatons. And like that's not those aren't the kind of educators who make a difference in kids' lives. You know, a kid could just read a book at that point.
yeah, there are YouTube videos for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think that we have to be vulnerable too. And that's part of not being perfect. That's part of being brave.
and it's a part of breaking out of that fixed mindset of you
Mhm.
have to be a certain person because of your gender or because of who you are or where you live or what school do you go to or what your parents do or what your grandparents do or what society
Right.
thinks you should do. So
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think that I have a real problem with the term self care as like a catch all, because I think a lot of times when we think of self care, we think of like a stock photo of like a woman eating salad, like a white woman eating salad, laughing, and like, you know, bubble baths. And interestingly, all of those self care things are geared towards women. So again, this industry creates this idea that you have to be perfect, which, by the way, you can never attain. And then you're so burnt out that you have to have another multi-billion-dollar industry just to feel like you're taking care of yourself, even though you're not. Like, it's kind of a vicious cycle, right? Like, so I do have some problems with the self care, but I think that she talks about, I mean, she does say, like, you know, don't eat stuff that makes you feel bad, like go outside, like those are all important things. But she also talks about how self care is not bubble baths, it's prioritizing yourself. And I struggle with that a lot. Um, and I think a lot of women do, but I think a lot of educators struggle with that too. Um, so I think that that's worth examining. Like what does prioritizing yourself look like? And if it is bubble baths and salads, like that's totally okay. Like,
Right. And I think it really is going to depend on the person in itself. I mean, puzzles,
mhm,
going on a bike ride, going on a hike, all those things, fishing, whatever, coding is kind of my outlet that I do. That and binge watching Disney Channel stuff. So, um, or Disney Plus. So I think it's going to look different for everybody. But I really do think prioritizing yourself is so important, especially now in the pandemic with everything so stressed
mhm,
and you're under a microscope all the time. And educators especially, because what they do in their classroom isn't just in a closed box. Like some people can go
mhm,
to work in a cubicle and they're not going to impact hundreds of people a day or whatever. So I think being an educator, you're not only answering to the students in your classroom, but all of your teachers around you and the administrators and the parents and the grandparents, and you're so much connected, that it can be extremely overwhelming and easy to get burnout. But how I prioritize myself, especially lately, is that with exception of book night, I try not to do any work at home unless it's absolutely positively necessary. I try to prioritize my family, and myself. I have to have some time to myself. So even if I have to pencil it into my calendar every day, just take 20 minutes for yourself. Do what you want to do in that 20 minutes. And it's going to look different probably every day. It could be go on a walk around the neighborhood. It could be take a bubble bath with a glass of wine. It could be read a book. It could be just lay in bed and watch Netflix. I mean, it could be anything. It could be like snuggle with a cat. I don't know. It's just 20 minutes to myself, because these educators are, most of them are also parents as well. They have bills and grocery shopping and checking the kids' homework, and there's so many things, and it's easy to get lost in there. But you gotta make time.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's no right way to prioritize yourself. Like there's no wrong way and there's no like the right way to do it. I love hiking. I do that often, but also even things like, I'm trying to finish my like never ending dissertation. And so I get up very early to write with someone else. And while it is quite early, it's kind of nice because it's time I'm by myself and I'm taking time very first thing in the morning to prioritize something that I want to do and I need to finish. And yes, it will impact other people, but I'm trying to do this for me more than anything else. I think it's also hard during the pandemic because and we're actually going to have a speaker talking about this in April about compassion fatigue. Like we're all very tired. Um and it'll be a year in March that like I haven't traveled. I've been wearing a mask everywhere. I've been very careful. And not only is that exhausting, but watching other people not do that is exhausting. And so it's frustrating because a lot of the things that were outlets for me pre-pandemic, like I can't do right now. And then you have that added layer of watching other people do them.
Right.
So like my self-care used to be like going to the movies very specifically by myself. No one could come with me during the day. I would always sneak in Chipotle, which like for more tips on how to sneak food into the movie theater, give me a call. I would always get the same snacks in addition to my Chipotle. And because I truly am an old lady, I would always take my knitting. I would get to the movie theater about 30 minutes before the movie, and I would snack on my Chipotle and knit before the movie started.
Wow.
Oh, yes. No, it was like a whole routine. And don't worry, I've been made fun of plenty for this. So, like, especially the knitting part. But, like, I can't do that right now, you know? And so I think that, especially with the pandemic, we are all having to prioritize ourselves maybe in new ways, or maybe we're forgetting to. And that's not, if you are listening to this and you are doing that, that is not your fault. But you should start prioritizing yourself, because eventually you do burn out and then you can't be brave. You can't be perfect. You're just,
A basket case.
yeah, you're surviving,
Right.
sort of. Right. Um, I actually, it wasn't in this book. It was in a Facebook group actually. Um, I heard a great quote the other day that you're a human being, not a human doing. So focus on what you are and what you want to be rather than what you can do.
Or what other people want you to do or expect you to
Right.
do.
Or what you feel like you need to do. Right. And there are things that, like, we genuinely need to do. Like, I genuinely need to drink water, but I will admit I'm a little nervous. My husband has put dinner in the oven and he's in charge of stirring it, and I'm a little anxious about this whole thing. I don't need to micromanage my 38-year-old husband making dinner that is in the, I made sure it was preheated oven. Like, that's something I need to do. So, like, focusing on, like, she talks about, like, nixing the need to please. Like, when you feel like you have to please others 24/7, to me, one of the big points of this book was like, that is where you immediately hit problems, is pleasing other people.
I agree with that 100%. I think my favorite part of that whole chapter, although there were so many on that, of nixing the need to please, but I think um, my favorite was nevertheless persist. Is
Hmm.
that, even though um, even though things can go wrong, and you really want to micromanage, um, or please, we all have an opportunity to keep trying to better ourselves, to keep trying to say no to the things that you can do very well, but maybe don't need to do. Um, Saying no is one of my biggest things. Is um, I'm not the whole, I can do it better myself. I'll just do it myself. I'm more of a um, I will help you get to where you need to be, and I will teach you how to teach a man to fish. I will teach you how to fish. But it seems that I need to teach a lot of people how to fish over and over again these days. It's like, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to catch a catfish. Now you want to start fishing for some bass. It's just it's a never ending cycle. But having patience with myself, and with others around me, I think is going to be my goal. Although I'm not going to say my very favorite from that whole chapter. You know, the one with the wonderful words in it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Just in case anybody hasn't read the book before they watch this, it does have some grown up language in it. Um, as somebody who kind of loves grown up language, I was okay with that. No, I think I agree. I mean, I think that the quote that Mitch McConnell gave us, towards Elizabeth Warren. So I actually have an Elizabeth Warren quote, and this is not political. I just think that she is a very eloquent speaker. She said, I'm looking at, she said, choose to fight only righteous fights, because then when things get tough, and they will, you will know that there is only one option ahead of you. Nevertheless, you must persist. But you can't identify. I love the choose to fight only righteous fights. And there is no fight more righteous than like taking care of your damn self. Like, we can all sit here and claim that teaching is a calling, and it is. And we can say that it's a thing that makes us happy about ourselves, and it is. But you're doing a disservice to children when you don't take care of yourself. So choose righteous fights. And if those righteous fights are, if today it's just taking care of yourself, like just do that. Like, and some days it is. Um, I think that this is one of the best chapters because she doesn't just tell you to do this, she has strategies. So like I have a really hard time with like asking for help. I actually saw this thing the other day that was like all of my problems could be solved if I were just better at asking for help, like literally everyone. But you know, she has strategies. So like start with like I would appreciate, or I was wondering, or I need. Be direct and clear about what you're asking for. I have a really bad habit of saying, I just wanted to check and see if you would mind. Like, stop saying just. Yeah. Be respectful, of course, because right. Would you mind? Yeah. Practice. Don't automatically offer an out. Like, I'm bad about that too. And don't apologize for asking. Now, sometimes I do have to be like, remember that time you sent me that thing and I couldn't find it? Sorry, could you send it to me again? But I think she does. She's, you know, she has these great strategies. And even in the part where she talks about Elizabeth Warren and this, you know, persistence, if you have something to say it. Like, again, not to be political, but our vice president during the debate said, I'm speaking. And I think we don't do that as often as we should. You know, reclaim your time, which is another great one. Promote yourself. And I really, really love this one. Spit out the salty lemonade. So there was a study done in this book about girls would, so they gave kids lemonade that wasn't sugary, it was salty, and the girls just drank it because they didn't want to make the researchers feel bad by telling them that it was gross. So like, we are grown-ups, it's time to spit the lemonade out. So if something is not working, you're doing yourself a disservice. And again, the righteous fights, you're doing yourself a disservice by not, you don't have to be rude or mean or terrible or whatever, but speaking up for yourself and standing up for yourself, I think, is something that we're encouraged to do, but never taught how to do or told that it's okay to do.
Right. It's one of those things where you can't be what you can't see.
Right.
If you don't see it, if you don't see it happening, and then you're not going to know how to do it. And that's one of the things where I've never. It's been a long time since I haven't spoken my mind. I think I took take after my mom. My mom has been called obtuse and condescending at times. So I've never been afraid to speak up for what I want. But in certain situations, I can see myself, well, what would I say? What have I said in that moment? Um, and it's usually around um, other women or
Mhm.
in those groups where you feel like you don't really belong, imposter syndrome, or when it comes to something that you're not an expert at, which is pretty much everything for me. It's in those situations. As you grow more comfortable, either in a job or in a relationship with someone, it's easier to have those conversations. But in the beginning, it's really tough. So
Yeah.
so one of the actually I got this idea from another one of our favorite books, Amber, Intention, um, and phrasing it, how might we? So
Mhm.
instead of saying you should do this or I, you know, and coming across as a know-it-all or one of those women, um, bringing others to the table, saying how might we fix this problem? How might we work together to find a solution to this problem. So,
Yeah. No, I think that that kind of goes along with like yes and, right? Like, I think so she talks in here about like forming a bravery club. Like we're not 10-year-olds who are going to form a Girl Scout club anymore. But like how amazing would that be to just have like a bravery club for adults? I mean, like I know I am an expert in a couple of things, not everything. I have a wide, shallow knowledge of a lot of things. But I am, for example, I am legitimately an expert in English history of the 17th century. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree. I'm finishing up my PhD. I've written articles, I've edited books. I am genuinely an expert in that. So why, when I get revisions back from my committee, do I feel like I have to take every one of their pieces of advice when none of them are experts in that? And I think we do that with everything. If you're in a classroom, you're an expert at your classroom. So why are you I mean, I take a lot of advice that I don't then take, right? But like, like, why are we letting people who are not experts but are in positions of power that we feel create a power dynamic? Why are we letting them change how we feel about the things that we're actually experts in? Like, that's not brave. That's perfectionism, and it's toxic. It's like toxic positivity. It doesn't allow for anything else.
you're trying to please everybody, you please no one.
Right.
So,
Right.
and that's something that you can't please everyone all the time, but you can only please some people some of the time.
Right.
So the most important person is to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Not at the expense of others, but you've got to take care of yourself.
Well, I think it's one of those things that doesn't work both ways. So don't take care of yourself at the expense of others, but don't take care of others at the expense of yourself. Like, I think that we have to fight the righteous fights and choose ourselves. And I think that that's hard to do. And there are all kinds of societal things that stop that. This is definitely written from, and I think we're speaking from places of privilege too, but it's, you know, choosing to have that mindset costs nothing. Maybe the actions are not doable for some people right now, but that mindset of bravery, I think costs no one anything. I'm trying not to use like double negatives here. I think that it's something that you can do, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. And I think men probably suffer from that as well. I imagine male educators do, because it is such like a female dominated field. So I think that I really enjoyed this book. I know we're almost out of time, but I would definitely. She also wrote another book, and I can't remember the name of it right now. It actually came out after this one. But she wrote, of course, Girls Who Code, Learn to Code and Change the World. And Girls Who Code is a great organization. We've actually worked with them a couple of times at conferences. They've been sponsors. So I definitely recommend this book. Like I said, it like Amy and I both brought up, it does have some grown-up words in it, but I would even recommend this, honestly. Like I would probably let Aya, my daughter, read it. She's 12. It doesn't have any grown-up words that she hasn't heard already. But I think that this is, especially if you have teenagers who struggle with self-confidence, I would highly recommend this book. So again, it's Brave Not Perfect by Reshma Saujani. And in February, we're going to be back the last week of February. And of course, February is Black History Month. I would make the argument that every month in America is Black History Month. and should be all year long. We shouldn't just have Black History Month activities in February, kind of like March is Women's History Month, and every month is Women's History Month. That said, so we're going to be reading How to Be an Anti-Racist, which a lot of you have probably read. It's very popular. If you haven't gifted anyone who's expecting a baby Anti-Racist Baby yet, then you are missing out on joy, because that book is so cute. Ibram Kendi is also going to have, I think he signed a deal with Netflix to do some shows too, and he's done a couple documentaries. So How to Be an Anti-Racist is a great book. Being not racist isn't enough. We have to be actively anti-racist. So we're going to talk about that in February. In March, we're going to be discussing another female author, Brene Brown, who many of you have probably read, and talking about the gifts of imperfection. And then we're going to talk about social media in April with a book called Irresistible. And so we have some really good books coming up. Just a reminder, if you're watching this, we also have a speaker series that we just started in January. So all those videos will be up too. You can register ahead of time, but they'll also be up on our website. We had Jonathan Mooney, who is a neurodiversity expert, speak in January. We've got Dr. Shonda Murphy, who's going to be talking about social media and mindfulness in February. We've got Dr. Patrice Reed talking about cultivating resilience in students in March. And then we have Dr. Danielle Jackson talking about compassion fatigue in April. So we'll have a speaker for May that we'll announce soon, and then we'll start back in the fall. But these are really good opportunities to learn about social emotional learning, like not from like a worksheet. So these are people talking about real life experiences. So thank you for watching this. Amy, do you have any final thoughts on Brave Not Perfect?
Just be brave. Not perfect.
And don't let perfectionism ruin good enough. I think is a good one. So awesome. If anyone is interested in purchasing the book, we'll put a link up with the video. We'll also put the discussion questions up, and we look forward to seeing you in February when we'll be reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. Have a great night.